Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang have finally reunified the South after Sun's untimely passing. Now it is time to finally stop infighting and look northward. Spoiler alert, the infighting will continue, and many will die along the way. For now, though, it is time to do something about this mess we call China, and make it whole again, or at least somewhat whole. The three main groups of warlords the KMT would be facing would be the forces under Wu Peifu, the Jade Marshal, in Hunan, Hubei, and Henan provinces, as seen on the left here. The coalition under Sun Chunfang, who controls Fujian, Xinjiang, Jiangsu, Anhui, and Jiangxi. And finally, the old marshal Zhang Zuolin, who controls Manchuria, Shili, and Shandong Peninsula. The first foe the KMT would fight would be the forces of Shili, with Wu Peifu being the main focus, starting in the Henan province. Taking Changsha by the 11th of July, while the bulk of the Zili forces were busy fighting Fang Yuxiang's Gumenjun in the north. At the same time, Wu refused help from Zhang's Fangtan clique, worried that if he let them in, they might as well kick his independence goodbye. The KMT and the NRA then decided that they should make a push on Wuchang, Wu Peifu's stronghold, and would decisively defeat Wu's forces, who would then retreat to North Hainan, where he would lose his grip on his forces, going on to live in Beijing, where, during the Second Sino-Japanese War, spoiler alert, there is one, he stated that he would become the leader of northern China again if all Japanese soldiers would give up their arms and head back to Japan. He would then be poisoned by the Japanese and die December 4th, 1939. With one Zhili warlord dealt with, it's time to tackle another, by thrusting first into Jiangxi province, taking Nanchang and Zhejiang with some help of a defector. Nevertheless, the KMT was forced out of many of their gains when Sun marched from Nanjing, brutally killing educators, students, and KMT sympathizers, or anyone that might be a KMT sympathizer, and placing their head on spikes. What a lovely guy. During this lull in fighting, the KMT was able to deal with the strike in Guangzhou and Hong Kong, freeing up men and winning a logistical victory in the fact that his supply lines were now freed up. There was another defection by Xia Qiao in Zhejiang province, but this was crushed by Sun and many were executed. Gee, I wonder why people don't want to work for this guy. There was then a push towards Fuzhou, and fighting continued in Jiangxi. In late October, the KMT were able to force Sun's forces to retreat from Jiangxi and Fujian, and by early November they secured Zhujiang and Hukou and retook Nanchang, where 20,000 casualties were taken by the KMT forces alone. Clearly realizing he could not handle the invasion on his own, Sun decided to go where Wu Peifu refused to go before, and visited Zhang Zuolin in hopes of assistance. The Fangtang agreed to take on the KMT, but some form of compensation would be due. This led to the creation of the National Pacification Army in early December, which would march to Anhui with 60,000 troops, which were direly needed, as many as the southern Zili troops and commanders had defected to the NRA. Following the pattern, Zhejiang seceded from Sun's control and was made an autonomous region of the southern government. This led to Sun, with the help of the NPA, invading Zhejiang, causing many of the rebels to flee into Kuzhou. Can't imagine why they'd want to get away from such a benevolent leader. The NRA marched north to assist the rebels and managed to halt the advance of Sun's forces. This was followed up by a counteroffensive that made it to Langxi and Jinhua, where Sun's forces were defeated by the NRA, and made the push to Hangzhou. To add insult to injury for the common people of China, the NPA troops broke rank and flooded north, looting what they could find on the way back. By this point, the NRA had swelled from mere 100k to close to 700k, coming close to, if not matching, the number of troops of the NPA. The time had come to make a push for Nanjing and Shanghai, where Sun had retreated his forces to by this time. Not in a good spot, Sun begged for help from Zhang Zuolin, who came to Anhui, and Jiangsu to help Sun, and to Henan to help what was left of the Jade Marshal's army. In March, the attack on Shanghai and Nanjing would begin, along an attack on Changsha, with the goal of severing the Shanghai-Nanjing Railway, the major path of supply for Nanjing. Outnumbered and outgunned, Sun's forces and the NPA were forced to withdraw to Shanghai, and the railway line was severed. Sun now had to deal with the enemy at his gates, his navy defecting, and a communist strike in the city to add insult to injury. After a ferocious battle, NRA forces marched into Shanghai, where the NRA commander in the area called it off. With the coast pacified, it was time to move on Nanjing, where the NPA had withdrawn from the city, which was taken without resistance. Of course, nothing is without bloodshed, as the Nanjing incident of 1927 had to occur, where mass anti-foreigner protests began. This unsurprisingly upset the governments which had concessions in the city, as they prefer to have their people in the concession alive and well. This resulted in the shelling of the city, as many foreigners were evacuated into chaos. This led to many in the KMT, including Chiang Kai-shek, blaming the communists for the uprising. This would be important soon enough. The government would move to Wuhan from Guangzhou and start to distance itself from Chiang and focus on containing his authority. A parallel government under Chiang would be formed in Nanjing, containing mostly right-leaning members of the Kuomintang. The communists would start demonstrations in the newly conquered areas, and I'm sure that will go well for them. The NRA captured the capital of Anhui Province, Haifei. Not all of Sun Chunfang's forces were destroyed and managed to regroup in the north with the rest of the NPA. Both sides decided to lick their wounds and regroup for the second phase of the conflict. All good things don't last forever, as the alliance that does not particularly make sense is put to the test now. If you recall, the USSR had been the primary source of equipment and influence on the KMT. They supplied arms, advisors, and covertly expanded the Communist Party in China. Surely nothing could go wrong there. By suggestion of Mikhail Borodin, the liaison from the USSR to the KMT, the nationalist government in Wuhan, which was made up of many left-leaning KMT members, issued edicts that stripped much of Chiang's power from him. These edicts had no power to back them up, so they did next to nothing. Good old KMT friend Wang Jingwei had returned from Europe by this point, had met with the CPC leader, and became the head of the Wuhan government. The situation would begin in Shanghai, where Chiang would instruct the Green Gang leader Du Yusheng to form a rival union to the communists who clearly exerted great influence in Shanghai. The writing was on the wall, as by April 9th, Chiang declared martial law and denounced Wang Jingwei's government. He would give the order to all provinces under his control to purge communists from the KMT. Widespread violence would occur on April 12th when Green Gang members attacked offices of Communist Union members, and the army was sent to disarm communists, which resulted in many dead or wounded. On the 13th, there was a mass demonstration of Union members and students to stop this violence, where they were promptly shot by the army to control the situation. By the end, it appears that 300 people were executed and over 5K went missing. That's going to happen a lot in this history. Chiang would then solidify his control on his government in Nanjing, which by now the two governments were called the Ninghan Split. The second phase of the operation would begin not by Chiang or Wang's orders, but by independent action of his generals. The Guminjun, under Fang Yuxiang, would make the first push from his camp in Shaanxi to North Henan province, where the NRA 1st and 6th armies would cross the Yangtze River into Anhui, followed by an attack by Li Zongren into the direction of Haifei. Now to make things a little more confusing, the Wuhan government made its own push into Henan, where they bested Zhang Zulin's son Zhang Zhilang, pushing them even farther back. The Nanjing government will launch its own offensive into the Shandong Peninsula through Jiangsu. Combined effort of all parties involved forced Zhang Zongchang back across the Yellow River, as the situation in the area had become untenable. Then the combined forces came in contact with each other after capturing the Longhai and Beijing-Hankow railways, further crippling the NPA's logistics. This started a process of wooing Fang Yuxiang to either of the KMT governments, where Chiang's won out, with the stipulation that communists would be purged. Yes, more people still have to die, as if it wasn't enough yet. Chiang wished to capture the Shandong Peninsula, but the arrival of Imperial Japan's Kwantung Army, the Japanese army in Manchuria, which was there on a peacekeeping mission to keep its citizens safe, not in the blue helmet style, mind you, but the Wuhan government's forces under Tang Shangxi, who was responsible for his earlier success against the NPA, was in the process of preparing his troops to crush Chang's government. Chang removed his troops from Shandong to defend from this attack. And seeing the opportunity, the Beiyang warlords pounced on the KMT forces, retaking a lot of lost land. Seeing how they messed up, and that even more people were going to have to die now, the two KMT governments started talks with each other. This ended up with the Wuhan government breaking with communists, more purges, and expelling Soviet advisors from their ranks. This caused a communist uprising in Nanchang, because people don't particularly like being purged. After more NPA victories, Wang Jingwei politely demanded Chang resign, which he did in early August. Maybe getting a little too ambitious, Sun Chunfang went against the command of Zhang Zuolin and attempted to take back Shanghai. This sent the NRA forces into a panic, and calls for a united push were underway. The Guminjin would attack into Shandong, while the Wuhan government sent troops in hopes of encircling Sun's forces, and other NRA forces pushed from Shanghai to meet Sun head-on. This result was a crushing defeat that led to the death of 10,000 of Sun's troops, approximately 30,000 captured, and Sun barely making it back across the river into Shandong. Now with a stable front, peace talks between the two KMT governments resumed, which resulted in the dissolution of the Wuhan government and the joint government formed in Nanjing. Wang Jingwei was appalled at this action and refused to work with the new government, and Tang Shenxi declared independence. In other news, the warlord of Shaanxi, Yan Zhishan, aligned himself with the KMT and started a push against Zhang Zuolin, where neither got the upper hand, as they're for the most part fighting in harsh terrain and across a river. Now realizing that they had a large warlord on their western border, the NRA moved on Tang, where he was bested and went into exile in Japan. Another day, another counteroffensive by the NPA, where they were forced back into the Shandong Peninsula again. Well, we haven't had a communist uprising in the last, let me check my watch, week or so. Maybe things are getting better. Oh wait, there's one in Guangzhou. Guess it's purging time again. Hooray. Lovely. This led to a break between the USR and the Nanjing government, another exiling for Wang Jingwei, and a return of Chang to the head of the NRA. It is now winter time, and a harsh trek north or south is not what anyone wants. Chang took this time to do fun things such as solidify his control and centralize his government. He decided that the expedition would resume in March. Spoiler alert, it took until April, when the NRA Collective Army, consisting of Guminjun and another under Yan Zhishan, made a push towards Shandong and the Beijing-Suiyuan Railway. The first Collective Army, made up of most of the initial soldiers of the expedition, swept into Shandong and with their allies took most of the major cities along the western and southern border, and after a decisive battle, pushed Sun Chunfang's forces back to Jinan. The Japanese, having learned of this advance, moved troops from Qingdao to Jinan. Now seemed as good a time as any to negotiate with the Japanese, who had a sizable army in Shandong. Having encircled the city, the NRA damaged the railways between Qingdao and Beijing, which the Japanese were defending. Oddly enough, no fighting occurred at this stage, but tensions certainly were high. The then retreating NPA forces fled Jinan and looted as they went through like the classy gentlemen they were. Then on May 3rd, a firefight broke out between the NRA forces and the Kwangtung Army. The sources get conveniently fuzzy here, as at the start of the incident, the Japanese destroyed the Chinese communication outpost. So we have to go with the Japanese story of events as they were reported. According to the Japanese, a group of NRA regulars, supposedly the same that caused the Nanjing incident, broke into a Japanese news agency and ransacked the place. A gang of Japanese soldiers then came to see what the fuss was about and were opened fire on by the Chinese and returned fire. Later Chinese reports vary on the details, but insinuate that the Japanese started the firefight. Whatever the reason, a full-scale brawl between the NRA and Japanese, where numerous atrocities would occur, including the killing of a Chinese diplomat, Cai Jiangxi, several of his staff, soldiers, and a cook for good measure. I'll spare the gruesome details, as we'll wait for another Japanese atrocity before I go full morbid on you. In short, the Chinese do bad things, Japanese also do very bad things. After a truce was signed between the Japanese General Fukada and Chiang, everything was fine. By which I mean the Japanese brought more troops in and started a full-scale offensive on the remaining Chinese troops in Jinan. The Japanese proceeded to bombard the old city where the NA troops were holed up. In a disturbing pattern, the civilians were not warned of the bombardment. Few other atrocities happened, but as you'll see with the pattern, authoritarian measures and killing of civilians for supposed collusion with the KMT would occur. In the aftermath, things looked grim for China if Japan ever chose to fully invade. Realizing that antagonizing the Japanese was a bad idea, the NRA First Army decided to go around anything remotely Japanese in the area and capture Denzhou by mid-May, with the Second Army headed towards Beijing via the Beijing-Hankow Railway. Yan Zhishan and his Third Army decided to follow the pattern and make a push for Beijing themselves from the west. The NPA decided a mass counteroffensive would be the way forward and succeeded in pushing the First and Second Armies back. Speaking about antagonizing the Japanese, they said that if there was fighting in Manchuria, the Kwantung Army would intervene. Zhang Zuolin, in response to the general unpopularity of his collaboration with the Japanese government, stated he would not recognize Japan's interest in Manchuria. This, in response, pissed off the Japanese, who advised him to evacuate to Manchuria, where they promptly disposed of the old marshal in their usual classy way, placing a bomb next to his train and killing the seasoned warlord. This had the unintended effect of completely destroying the NPA's morale, who would have imagined, and causing Yan Zhishan's Third Army to take Beijing. Zhang Zhilang, the young marshal, would take over his father's position, not pursuing his father's murderers as to avoid a casus belli for the Japanese. He would go on to join the KMT, much to some of his forces' chagrin, who openly declared war on the Fangtang clique. Specifically, Zhang Zongchang and some White Russian émigré mercenaries invaded Manchuria and were encircled and either defected, deserted, or massacred if they refused desertion. With Zhang Zhilang declaring official allegiance to the KMT, China was unified again. Sort of. It was more of a loose conglomeration of Kuomintang-aligned warlords, but things are finally looking on the up and up. There's even this cool railway system in Manchuria the KMT has access to. More on that later.